How's it going, you guys? I hope you're doing better than me nowadays. Just thought I'd try and clue you guys in on what's been going on with me since I haven't made a single video in almost, 10 months or so? The reason I disappeared, in its most basic terms, my mom got cancer. Breast cancer, to be specific about it. So I packed up all of my stuff from the house I was living in Texas. I'll throw some clips up on screen, from where I was. And I moved to Florida. I just straight up I left. I left my place. I left all my stuff for the most part, all my furniture at least, and I flew to Florida, to try and help out with my mom. Cause if we're being honest with each other here, who wants to go through something like that alone? I would like the answer to be nobody, but I'm sure somebody might. Anyway, it was almost a year ago at this point. I was visiting her at her condo here in Florida. She had like one or two doctor's appointments, some checkups she was going to, and she came back from one of them, and within about 2 minutes of walking in the door, she just started crying. So of course I gave her a hug and stuff, and like we talked about it. She explained how the doctor told her like the diagnosis, how they're lucky they caught it early enough that they could actually do something about it, and luckily they sort of calmed her down at first about it, because naturally when you hear the words like you have cancer, your mind it goes to like 20 billion different places, none of which are good. So the doctors they calmed her down for at least like 20 minutes, but then she came home and we talked about it for about like 3 hours, because it was a horrible situation. Like, what else are you supposed to do? And after she told me, like, I couldn't deal with it at all to any capacity. I sort of just quietly was freaking out the entire time. The only thing I really figured that I knew how to do in that moment was make us some food. As silly as that sounds, it was the only thing I knew how to do, because I was fighting off like anxiety attacks. And while I'm trying to make us some food, I'm like shaking and freaking out. I'm trying to hide how scared I am, because I don't want to freak her out even more than she's over here rambling, telling me like all the stuff that the doctor said, and I'm like trying to comprehend the fact that like this is happening to my mom. My mom, of all the people in the world, has this horrible terminal like illness, something you can't just drink a bottle of like cough medicine and hope that you feel better. Like, no, this is something that takes like skill and nuance and surgeries to get rid of. That's not even mentioning like just to get rid of it, and just the idea that it could come back again. It's terrible. I wouldn't recommend it on anyone, really. I wouldn't wish this on some of my worst enemies, like, for real. It must have taken us like a day or so to figure out like how we were gonna budget this out and how we were gonna pay for everything. Like if we were gonna take out bank loans to pay off the surgeries, the doctors and whatever. Luckily, insurance took care of a good majority of it. Still left us with a good amount of bills, a fat amount, but at least it wasn't entirely like I get a bill for $90,000 and I have to pay $90,000. They'll only ask for like maybe a fraction of that, for example. Thank goodness. I can't think of a single job. I can't think of a single job you could get right now that would pay for any of that, really, and you would still be able to live, if you know what I mean. You'd be able to budget it out, like pay for those bills and keep yourself alive. No. Speaking of jobs and all that, in all this time I've taken off, I ended up picking up a couple side jobs here and there. Ended up getting a couple stories from them. That was all right. Point is, I was only really there to get a paycheck and leave, which is when it ended up happening. Didn't make too many friends along the way. Got my paycheck at these places and left. Went home, hung out with my mom. After a while, slowly but surely, I thought this went without saying, but the boxes from the house I was in would slowly arrive, because from one remote location to another remote location, from A to B, it took roughly around like a month and a half for all my stuff to arrive. So while I'm in the middle of helping my mom, I'm receiving all of my possessions and stuff through the mail, slowly but surely unpacking everything, getting down to a couple boxes at that point. And just as the last sets of my boxes, my possessions, were coming in from the mail, I picked up a job at Spirit Halloween. That was an experience like on its own, I would say. But all we really need in this case is the time frame, like what's going on at this point, like the jobs I'm working. Because while I'm working at Spirit was around the time she would go in for her first couple of surgeries, which absolutely scared me to death. Like the idea of my mom having to get any sort of surgery is really frightening, actually. I don't like the idea, the sound of that. That's no. Never mind that I can't even afford like my own plane ticket, to get on the plane with her to go to these places, because usually she would head to Atlanta. I think, yeah, she would usually go to some place in Georgia. It was probably the city Atlanta, because that place has a lot of their medical stuff on lock or something. So while she's taking all of these plane trips to Georgia to see all these doctors and talk to all these radiologists and whatever, I'm sitting over here in Florida, freaking out, kind of hoping that like everything goes okay, even though I'm not even there in person. So naturally I'm freaking out. I can't even be there in person to like make sure make sure the doctors are doing their jobs. Everyone's where they're supposed to be, even though I have no idea how a hospital's supposed to work. When you're in that situation and you feel like you're powerless, like you just want something, you just want to be able to control something, to do something right. And I couldn't. She's hundreds of miles away and I'm over here just stuck in our condo. So all I really did on these trips is clean. Like usually where I would have been editing a video, I just cleaned. I straight up gave up. I'd clean the house or I'd go to work. There was hardly any point in like making this public or mentioning it to anyone, even though sure I would have gotten tons of support, but how's that actually gonna make the situation better? Talking about an issue is one thing, to bring awareness to it, but actually dealing with an issue when it comes to something like this, I just chose to do what would physically make the situation better. So I chose to go out and make money. Painting apartments, washing cars, really any sort of retail job for the most part. Almost anything except for just standing on the corner asking for money. Pretty much. Everything else was fair game. Around that time, my mom told me how the doctors were talking to her about how they felt relieved that they caught it so early. Quote unquote, they caught it early, but if you ask me, they couldn't have caught it early enough. The fact she had it at all is quite concerning and bothering to me. So, yeah, the doctors were talking to her about how she's lucky that, referring to my mom here, she's lucky that she actually goes in for a checkup. Apparently, unlike a lot of people nowadays, they just don't get checked up. So they were able to catch it in time that it was small enough that they could do like anything about it. As compared to, something where they're taking out like maybe something the size of like a jelly bean or a penny, for example, or like a grain of rice. All three of those, in terms of the size of whatever you're taking out in the surgery, would require different methods and procedures and how you would approach, taking said whatever out of someone. This is completely neglecting to mention like what part of the body or whatever you're trying to get out, like where it's located. And as I'm sure most of you know, that's quite important for a lot of surgeries, depending like where you're getting something taken out of or something moved or reattached or connected, anything like that. A lot of things can go wrong. To think that I put my mom's health, my mom's life in the hands of these complete strangers, these doctors I've never met before in my life. I don't even know what they look like. I can hardly remember their names. I'm putting all this trust, all this faith into complete strangers, people I've never met before. And I'm just hoping they can even do their job right, or at least do it clean enough to, make sure there's no more complications. That was tough. That was for sure one of the toughest feelings, knowing that you can't really do anything in those situations. Like, you're kind of useless unless you're a professional surgeon who's used to doing this, this whole procedure with exact precision. I couldn't see how most people would be comfortable with this. I gotta say here, I'm glad they did their job and they did it right, because as far as I know, everything's cool now. Everything's fine. This all happened months ago, so everything is for sure airtight, I'd say. Everything's fine. Yes, I was pretty scared about these complete strangers, performing such an operation on my dear mother, but They did their job, they knew what they were doing, and I think that's the moral of this. Like, I didn't have the amount of trust in these strangers that most people probably do. They did the job they were asked to do. They were professional about it. My mom asked the right questions, so she got the right answers. She relayed all this to me when she got back. We made heads or tails of it and just built up from there. From then on, we were just dealing with the bills. I picked up a couple extra jobs while she took, I think she took, what's it called? A short leave of absence, like temporarily or something, from her whatever job she was working at the time. And unlike a lot of companies nowadays, I'm sure most of them wouldn't be alright with someone just disappearing for a couple months, you know, like not working much at all. But for whatever reason, like, the company my mom worked for was really chill about it. They were fine, they understood the situation. And on my end, I had just I stopped working on really any videos for the most part. Aside from maybe like 1 or 2 edits a week. Not a day, a week. I just didn't work on anything. So with that in tandem with the schedule I was building up towards last year, with what I wanted to do for, you know, the upcoming year, I just couldn't keep up with that schedule I was building up towards. I hyped it up for myself, and then that whole situation happened. It was just dead in the water. Like, at that rate, I would have been producing maybe like 1 video every 2 months. And at that rate, I could see how that'd be discouraging, because, like, what's the point of even working on 1 video for 2 months? You know, something that would usually take me like a week or 2 to edit, you know, it's taking me 2, almost 3 months to freaking work on. Looking back on it now, I definitely wish I just worked on some videos a little bit more to take my mind off of the situation at hand. But instead, I just wanted to be there. I just wanted to be there for my mom and just, well, take care of her. And I know some of my friends who hear this aren't going to understand, because honestly, like, a majority of my friends always talk about how much they hate their parents. So they're probably not even going to be able to relate to a lot of what I have to say in this video about, you know, just how much I actually cared for my mom in this circumstance, for me to drop everything I was working on in Texas to fly down here and just, you know, stay with her and help her out through this. But I guess, to put it simply, at the end of the day, I made a judgment call. I said to myself, am I going to be able to sleep at night knowing I just let my mom deal with this on her own? Or am I going to be a good son, you know, be a good person and go down there and do what I could? And I chose the latter. I chose the latter, and honestly, I feel a whole hell of a lot better now that I did. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't fly down here to try and do whatever I could. No. That's just not right. That's just not right to me. So, yeah. For better or for worse, to give you guys an explanation as to why I've been gone so long, what I've been dealing with, and, you know, what my days and weeks have been like leading up to this video. This is it. That all being said, now that we've moved past that, now that we can actually move forward, I started busting out like dozens of stories. I'm actually preparing for some semblance of a work schedule. Something a lot more akin to a video posting schedule of what I had last year. Maybe, if not better. With that all being said, thank you guys for still sticking around. Everybody watching this video, you're freaking awesome. And I just hope this clears up, you know, why I disappeared. If anyone even cares, you know. You guys stay safe, drink water. I'll post a new video tomorrow, something a lot more lighthearted and upbeat. See you guys then.